Enough. He's not clear-headed anymore. Next week, get him into a nursing home. My son-in-law's voice came through cold on the phone my daughter forgot to take off speaker. I stood still at the sink, water dripping onto my slightly shaking, wrinkled hands. Then my daughter's voice answered slow, precise, without a hint of hesitation. This house will sell for at least $900,000, honey. It's time we lived for ourselves. They talked about their life, not knowing they had just buried my spirit. I looked around the kitchen where Miriam used to laugh, the sunset laying over my wife's photo like a farewell. I dried my hands, opened the safe, and let out a long breath. Tomorrow, they'll learn this burden knows how to clear his own path. If you're still here, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Every comment helps this story reach more hearts, and if it moved you, give it a like so others can find it too. My name is Walter Gaines, 71, living in the suburbs of Raleigh, North Carolina in a 2-story wood house I've been working on with my own hands for 25 years. I used to be a city building inspector, a job that made me meticulous, patient, and responsible. Now, those skills are about to protect the most important project of my life itself. I could still hear them clearly through the phone, the sound carrying in the empty kitchen like wind whistling through an old frame. Dylan spoke in a voice as cold as a tax report. "Don't worry, I'll handle all the paperwork. Just a few signatures. The nursing home in Cary is decent," Chloe answered softly, like someone trying to rationalize guilt. "You know, it's dangerous for Dad to live alone like this, and the maintenance on the house is expensive." Maintenance. The way they said it, it felt like they were discussing tossing an old appliance, not a father who carried his child through every fever. I braced my hands on the sink and took a deep breath. The metallic smell from the faucet mixed with dish soap pulled me back to Miriam, my wife, who helped me build this home from the first bricks. I looked at her photo on the shelf, that gentle smile and warm eyes as if saying, "Walter, I trust you'll know what to do." And I did. I walked to the safe by the dining table and opened it. Inside, neatly stacked, were all the house papers, title, property tax records, and the will Miriam and I had set up. The sole owner now is Walter Gaines. No co-owner, no mortgage, no one else has a claim. I sat down and opened a worn leather notebook, flipping through Miriam's notes. On the last page, dated 2016, she wrote, "If one day I'm not by your side, remember, don't let your kindness become the rope around your neck." I chuckled under my breath. She saw what I refused to see. The phone screen still glowed, the call hadn't ended. Dylan's voice faded. They'd probably left the room. I tapped end without a word. Outside, the late light glittered on the roof I repainted last spring. I remember every nail, every grain in this house. I worked a lifetime to keep it sound, and now they want to sell it just to start their own life. I looked around the living room where Chloe took her first steps in the early 80s. I still have the sofa Miriam picked out at a local sale. Every object holds a piece of memory, and I knew if they took this house, those memories would be wiped up like sawdust with a rag. I opened my old computer, found my contacts, and called attorney Aisha Patel, the one who helped us update the will after Miriam passed. Her voice came quick and professional. "Hello, Mr. Gaines. Good to hear your voice. How can I help?" "I need to see you tomorrow morning," I said, calmer than I expected. "It's about the house." "Of course. Is 8:30 a.m. okay?" "Good. And thank you, Miss Patel." I hung up and sat for a long moment. The ticking wall clock, our 40th anniversary gift from Miriam, beat steady, like the house's heartbeat. I spoke to it, and to myself. "We're not done, Miriam." I opened the safe again and pulled file after file: Chloe's tuition bills, the car loan I co-signed, the wedding invoices I covered when Dylan was unemployed. Each number was proof of a lifetime of giving. I put them neatly into an envelope, not to collect, but to remember. I walked the hall, checking the front and side door locks. The old inspector habit never left me. Each lock, each click reminded me this house was still mine. I marked the spots that needed new hardware. Dusk fell. The sunset streaked red across the wall like an old flame waking up. I poured some mint tea and sat at the dining table. A quiet certainty spread through me. No rage, no bitterness, just a clear resolve. I knew Chloe would still call tonight like always, ask a few polite questions about dinner and my health, her voice gentle but hollow. I'd still answer, still be easy, still the kind old man they think I am. But inside, another part of me had woken, the man who won't let anyone decide his fate. I opened my notebook and wrote one line: my assets, my decisions. I underlined it twice and closed the book. Outside, the maples were deepening into red. Fall was coming. Night air carried dry grass and the last cicadas. I stood, turned off the kitchen light. Before leaving the room, I looked at Miriam's photo again. She smiled, steady and kind, like the day we first met in the school woodshop. "A promise is a promise," I whispered, almost a prayer. "I won't let anyone trample our memories." I turned out the lights. The house sank into quiet. It was just me, the dark, and a plan taking shape. Tomorrow, when the sun comes up, I'll take the first step, meet Aisha, confirm the title, and lay the foundation for a quiet counterattack, not for revenge, but to protect the one sacred thing left between me and Miriam: dignity. The next morning, first light pushed through the heavy curtains, landing on small cracks in the oak dining table. I sat with a cooling cup of coffee I didn't drink. Papers still lay spread from last night, each bill, each memory I had gathered. I went through them one by one. 4 years of Chloe's tuition at the University of North Carolina, totaling $52,000. Each number was a late shift, a long day, another midnight coffee Miriam brewed so I wouldn't nod off while budgeting. Then her wedding, $28,000, way over what we planned. I remember saying we should keep it small, but Chloe cried, saying, "It's the one day in my life I want perfect." I made it happen. In the stack was a note clearly marked "Auto Loan Guarantee, Dylan Mercer, $14,600. I remember the day Dylan lost his job at the investment firm. Head down, rough voice. "Dad, it's temporary. I'll pay you back soon." I believed him, the way I believed kindness gets returned. I leaned back and looked at the pile as if looking at my life itself, wrapped in numbers and signatures. On the wall, our wedding photo still glowed in the sun. Miriam, in a simple white dress, smiling among the magnolias she loved most. I could hear her in my head. "Walter, don't give too much. Give too much and people forget how to say thank you." I laughed then and said, "It's okay. We're parents, we're their anchor." Now I understand when sacrifice becomes routine, people stop seeing it as love. They see it as obligation. I walked to the living room shelf. A row of thick, leather-bound albums had faded. I took the first one down. The opening photo is Chloe at 5, holding a toy hammer, copying me while I laid the floor. "Dad, you're my hero," she once said, bright as a summer afternoon. I closed the album. After all these years, that line collides with last night's ice-cold words: "Put him in a nursing home." It hurts not because I was betrayed, but because I taught my child that everything can be given, even respect. I inhaled and returned to the legal folder. I checked every detail with an inspector's eye. No mortgage, no disputes, no joint title. Miriam's death certificate filed, our will updated in 2018. Everything lawful, neat, like a well-run job site. I made a short list in my notebook. 1. Keep Miriam's wedding ring, never for sale. 2. Family albums, the only proof love really happened. 3. Old toolbox, the thing I used to build this place from the footings to the roof. 4. Miriam's last note, a final reminder about self-respect. Each line felt like a pledge. I wrote slowly but steady. By midday, I brewed more coffee and opened the computer. I went to Carolina Storage's site. I filled out the form, booked a mid-size unit for 3 months. I would move all of Chloe and Dylan's belongings there. Clothes, wedding keepsakes, old stuff. I'd seal everything and keep an inventory. They'd have exactly 30 days to pick it up. After that, storage fees would kick in. No fights, no yelling. I wanted them out of my life in an orderly way. When it was done, I printed the confirmation and clipped it to the file. My hands shook a little, not from fear, but from realizing I was truly ready. Afternoon light thinned through the kitchen window where Miriam used to stand. I could see the wood grain I once hand-sanded. This was a home, not a battlefield. But now it was the line between memory and reality. I pulled a pencil and notebook from the drawer and wrote on a fresh page, "Don't argue, act." I underlined it 3 times. I didn't want to spar with Chloe or Dylan. They might see me as old, weak, slow. Let them. The more they underestimate me, the less they'll expect, and that's when I'll move the fastest. I still remember Chloe hugging me at her college graduation, eyes red with joy. "Without you, I'm nothing." Now, maybe in her eyes, I'm nothing, but that's life. People change when gratitude turns into entitlement, when love gets mistaken for duty. I pulled out my phone, scrolled the contacts, stopped at Marcus O'Neill, top real estate agent in the area. I'd met him years back when he priced a friend's house. Fast, discreet, trustworthy. I sent a brief text. "Hi, Marcus. I need a quick evaluation on a house in Midtown Raleigh. Owner is me. Can you come by tomorrow afternoon?" Not 2 minutes later, he replied, "Hi, Mr. Gaines. Absolutely. I can be there at 2 p.m. We'll go over details." I closed the phone, feeling a weight lift. Things were lining up. That night, I ate simply a bowl of chicken soup and a few slices of toast. Outside, summer insects hummed. I turned on the living room light and opened Miriam's album. In one photo, she's laughing, hair caught in a breeze, holding a coffee cup, looking straight into the lens like she's saying, "Don't go soft." I told the picture softly, "You know, I used to think losing the house meant losing everything, but now I see the real loss is faith in the ones you love." I closed the album and set it on the table. This wasn't pain anymore, it was my final life lesson. Late, I stepped onto the back porch. A thin crescent moon hung behind the magnolias Miriam planted. The night smelled of dry leaves and old wood. I sat on the wooden chair, drew a long breath, felt the chill through my hair. Tomorrow will be a long day, but I'm ready. I went back in and shut off the lights, leaving only the desk lamp. Its warm glow washed over the last line in my notebook. "Don't argue, act." And I knew, from that moment, a new journey had begun. The next morning, I drove to Aisha Patel's office, a red brick building downtown. The streets were still quiet, the sun just above the trees, throwing bright streaks on the windshield. I parked by a small sign that read, "Patel and Associates, Family Law and Estates." Inside, the smell of roasted coffee mixed with old paper made me feel both strange and secure, the smell of things that are clear and orderly. Aisha greeted me at the door. She's around 40, Indian American, speaks gently but with sharp eyes. We'd worked together a few years back updating the will after Miriam died, so there was trust. "Mr. Gaines, good to see you," she said, shaking my hand. "You look tense. What's going on?" I sat, set my file case on the walnut table, took a breath, and told her everything: how the call slipped, the cold talk between Chloe and Dylan, the plan to sell the house, the nursing home. Aisha listened without interrupting, jotting quick notes. When I got to the part about starting their new life with my house money, her eyes darkened. When I finished, the room was quiet for a few seconds. The wall clock ticked, loud and even. "Mr. Gaines," Aisha said slowly, "you need to be very clear. That house is solely yours. No one, including your daughter or son-in-law, can force a sale, seize it, or decide where you live while you're competent. They can pressure you emotionally, but legally, they can't touch your assets without your consent. I nodded. Hearing that lifted half my worry. Nights of fearing I'd be pushed out suddenly turned into something manageable: clauses and signatures. What you need now is a smart plan, not payback, Aisha continued, steady. I recommend a quick cash sale. I have partners who buy these properties with a clear condition. The seller can remain in the home for 30 days after closing. That gives you time to clean up, move, or simply rest before your new life starts. I looked at her, thinking, how fast could that realistically happen? If you decide now, she said, we can wrap it in 10 days. I let out a dry laugh. I was a building inspector all my life, never thought I'd be the one dismantling my own house. Aisha tilted her head, a slight smile. You're not dismantling it, Mr. Gaines. You're transferring it before someone else steals. We sat in a short silence. She drafted a limited power of attorney, authorizing her to handle the paperwork and buyer communication. That would keep me from having to face Chloe or Dylan, who would surely react badly once they found out. Aisha slid the draft to me. This is a narrow authorization, valid only during the transaction. I'll sign what's necessary on your behalf and wire funds to an account in your name at the bank we'll set up. I read every line, then signed. The pen on paper sounded like a small vow. One more thing, she said. I'll draft a preventative legal notice to send to the local court and the district police department stating that you are the lawful owner and do not consent to anyone registering residency at that address other than yourself. If they try to enter the house or change the locks, you can call the police immediately. They'll already have it on file to intervene. I nodded, feeling as if an invisible shield had just been raised around me. Now the financials, Aisha continued. I recommend you open a new account at Piedmont Community Bank. It's a smaller bank with private service, less attention. The account will have two-factor security and will link directly to the legal file I manage. All sale proceeds will go into that account, and no one else will be able to access it. I asked, can you help me get in touch today? Of course, she said, picking up the desk phone and calling the branch manager directly. You'll meet with David Morrison, the Director of Personal Services. He'll set everything up within 24 hours. I listened, feeling something new rise in me. I was rebuilding my life, not with a happy fresh start, but with a careful escape plan. Aisha looked up, her voice lower. There's one more thing I want you to consider. They won't understand why you sold the house. They'll get angry, maybe try to smear you, or claim you're not mentally competent. I advise you to keep speaking the way you always do, warm, gentle, so they think everything is normal. That's the best way to stay in control. I smiled. I've done that my whole life, Miss Patel. Let them think I'm weak. The weak sometimes surprise people the most. She smiled lightly, gathered the files, and handed me a business card. Remember, Mr. Gaines, from now on, don't sign anything from them. If they bring you papers, forward them straight to me. Everything goes through counsel. I stood and shook her hand. Aisha's hand was small but firm. As I turned to go, she added, You're doing the right thing, and you're not alone. Stepping out of the office, the morning wind hit my face, carrying the smell of coffee from the shop across the street. People hurried by, traffic flowed, everything looked normal, but only I knew I'd just stepped over a new line in my life. I checked my watch, just 10 a.m. Chloe and Dylan were on their way to a conference in Atlanta, a 7-day work trip. I remembered exactly what Chloe said on the phone last night. Dad, I'll be gone a week. Don't eat canned food, okay? I left some meals in the fridge. She didn't know that time would become the golden window for my entire plan. I drove slowly through familiar streets, magnolias dropping white petals along the road. In the rearview mirror, my face showed deep lines, but my eyes had never been this clear. I parked outside the little diner Miriam and I used to visit every Sunday morning. I ordered a black coffee and sat at our old table, watching the light filter through the window. Everything around me felt oddly peaceful, but inside, a storm was forming, and this time, I was the one steering it. I took out a pen and wrote in the corner of a napkin, a final reminder to myself. When others plan their future with your assets, use those same assets to buy back your freedom. I folded the napkin and slipped it into my wallet. Outside, the sun had climbed high. I paid, left the diner, and got in the car. A new chapter was waiting, the chapter where I, Walter Gaines, would finally be the one at the wheel. 2 days after the meeting at Aisha's office, at exactly 2 p.m., a car pulled up in front of my house. From the living room window, I saw Marcus O'Neill step out, white shirt sleeves rolled up, polished shoes, the quick, practiced gait of a real estate professional. He smiled, lifting a file case and tablet. "Mr. Gaines, great to see you again. I hear you did most of the renovations yourself." I nodded and shook his hand. "Every piece of wood in here has been through these hands." Marcus looked around, his eyes assessing quickly but thoroughly. I knew that look, practical, yet respectful. He understood the value of real work. We walked the entryway, sunlight through the magnolia branches making bright spots on the brick path. I showed him the floor I replaced last year. 3/4-inch oak, sourced from Kentucky. I installed it myself, no contractors. Marcus bent and tapped it with the end of his pen, then smiled. "Solid sound. This holds value well, you know. These days a lot of people go with laminate or vinyl. Real wood like this is getting rare." We moved to the kitchen. Afternoon light poured through the big window, washing over the honey-toned countertop. I ran my hand across the surface, cool, smooth, still the same color as the day Miriam chose it. "This slab," I said. "My wife spent a week picking it. She said it looked like sunlight and honey." Marcus paused, studied it, then nodded. "Exactly, Mr. Gaines. This is a selling highlight. People pay for that warm feeling." That made me smile. Miriam would have liked hearing that. She always said the kitchen was the heart of a home. Marcus pulled up a map of recent sales in Midtown Raleigh on his tablet, pointing at clusters of red dots. Comparable homes here over the last 3 months closed between $870,000 and $930,000. Given your condition, well-maintained, cohesive finishes, strong location, I recommend a quiet listing at $910,000. I frowned slightly. What does quiet listing mean? "No yard sign, no public ads," Marcus explained. "I'll present it within my private network, mainly cash investors. They move fast, bring fewer complications, and usually accept a seller occupancy period." I nodded. "The quieter, the better. I don't want neighbors curious, and I definitely don't want Chloe finding out." Marcus understood and didn't pry. He toured the house, noting details: the natural light, electrical system, solid roof, fresh exterior paint. He worked and chatted, asking small questions that told me he really cared. "Out on the back porch," he said. "If you agree, I can send this to my investor group today. They like turnkey properties, move in or rent ready. Typically, they'll make an offer within 48 hours. My conditions are simple," I said. "Close in 10 days, and I stay 30 days after closing. Minimal paperwork, no financing contingencies." Marcus smiled and wrote it down. "I'll make sure that's explicit. With cash buyers, we can be very quick." He pulled a brokerage agreement from his case. I read every page, clean language, no tricks. Quiet listing, no signs, no advertising. Exactly what I wanted. I signed. The pen on paper sounded like a big engine just switched on. "Thank you, Mr. Gaines," Marcus said, giving my hand a firm squeeze. "I'll update you as soon as I hear back." That evening, the house was unusually still. I sat by the window, watching the last light spread over the wall. Part of me felt lighter, Another part heavy, like I was saying goodbye to an old friend. I told myself. Sometimes, to keep something, you have to leave at the right time. Around 8 p.m., my phone buzzed. Marcus's name lit the screen. I answered, and his voice carried an energy I hadn't heard earlier. "Mr. Gaines, good news. An investment group out of Charlotte reviewed the photos and my notes. They're impressed. They're offering $905,000 cash. No financing. No repair requests. They just need to confirm condition and sign within 48 hours. I was silent for a few seconds, listening to the clock tick. Do they accept the 30-day stay? Yes, sir. I made that clear. They accept everything. $905,000. Enough for Chloe and Dylan to dream about, but now it would be in my hands. The man they plan to remove. I'll confirm with my attorney, I said. If she approves, we move forward. Perfect. I'll email the preliminary contract right now. After hanging up, I called Aisha, calm as ever, with a hint of satisfaction. I've reviewed the offer, Aisha said. Terms are solid, no risk, no mortgage, and your occupancy right is fully protected. I recommend you accept. I nodded, though she couldn't see. Thank you, Miss Patel. You know, this might be the hardest decision I've ever made. No, Mr. Gaines, she replied. The hardest decision is believing you deserve to be free. The rest is paperwork. When the call ended, I sat a long time in the living room. The warm light on Miriam's photo made her smile look alive. Relief washed over me, not for the money, but for regaining control. I opened my laptop, signed the confirmation electronically, and sent it back to Aisha and Marcus. Then I closed the computer, leaned back, and exhaled a long breath. The gears were turning smooth, quiet, and none of it needed an audience. Outside, the night wind moved through the magnolias, dropping a few white petals on the porch. I stepped out, breathing in damp wood and dry leaves. In the moonlight, the house looked as beautiful as ever, but I no longer saw it as a holding cell, more like a ship coming to its final dock before I crossed over to the far shore of freedom. I spoke to Miriam into the breeze. I'm doing the right thing, love, not to strike back but to keep our dignity. The night felt still. Inside me, the fear had settled. Only calm remained. Everything was moving on track. Tomorrow the inspections would begin and a new chapter of my life would open, tidy and quiet, the way I've done things for 71 years. I started my morning earlier than usual. The Raleigh sky was softly gray, the smell of dew mixing with faint damp wood from the backyard. In the quiet house, each step sounded gentle, as if I might wake the past. I knew today was the day I had to start saying a real goodbye. On the dining table, I'd set out 4 things, everything I would take: Miriam's pale gold wedding ring, the family photo album, the old toolbox, and the Bible, where Miriam kept a pressed maple leaf. I looked at them a long time, like staring at 4 pieces of a soul left from a marriage of more than 40 years. The wedding ring was worn on the inside where I'd once engraved her name. I slid it onto my pinky. It fit perfectly. The album still smelled like old paper. The film photos had yellowed. In one, Miriam stood by the kitchen window, light streaming through her hair, and I, the one behind the camera, caught a smile that stopped the world. The toolbox, heavy, rusted, but I couldn't part with it. It stands for everything these hands have ever made. I'll keep it, not because I need it, but because it reminds me I can still do something with my own strength. And the Bible, with a red maple leaf pressed in the middle, the one Miriam picked our first year here. In the margin, she wrote in her soft hand, "Everything falls, but roots remain." I touched that line lightly, feeling as if she were still beside me. For the rest of the house, I began sorting with a clear head. Everything of Chloe and Dylan's clothes, books, a few old electronics they left, I boxed neatly in labeled cartons. On each box I wrote in black marker, "Property of Chloe and Dylan Mercer." Not spiteful, just clear. I called Carolina Storage to confirm the unit. A man named Eddie answered, cheerful voice. "We've got Unit 2B available, 10 by 15 with a private lock. Need us to help with transport?" "I've got it," I said. "Just send me the receipt. I'll pay the first 3 months in full." That afternoon, a small moving truck pulled up. 2 young guys loaded the boxes. I stood on the porch watching the last of it leave, my chest light as if a weight had lifted. When they handed me the paperwork, I signed and got a receipt with a 30-day window. If they want their things, they only need to show their names. If not, the unit will close up, like everything that once belonged to them. At noon, I called a locksmith, a middle-aged man named Barry with almost 30 years in the trade. He arrived on time, an old pickup in the driveway. "Change all the locks front and back," I told him. "Want me to hold a spare?" "No," I said. "1 set is enough. I'll pay cash." He worked fast, clean, no questions. When the final click sounded from the new lock, I felt a chapter close. I paid, shook his hand, and watched him drive off, the air still holding the smell of metal and lubricant. By late afternoon, I sat at the table and pulled up info on Magnolia Ridge Senior Residences, the place Aisha had suggested. A premium independent living community, not a nursing home. I called, and the manager Linda answered warmly. "We have a west-facing unit on the 2nd floor, 1 bedroom with a kitchenette. Would you like a month-to-month lease?" "Can I see it this afternoon?" "Yes, Mr. Gaines. It's ready." 2 hours later, I stood inside. Clean, bright, a balcony overlooking white blooming magnolias. No disinfectant smell, no blaring TV. Just a quiet space, enough for the rest of my life. I signed on the spot, put down 3 months' deposit, and paid by personal check. It felt different. I chose where to live. No one placed me anywhere. That night, I walked each room, each corner full of memory. I started in Miriam's kitchen where she hummed every morning brewing coffee. I paused by the reading chair at the window where I watched night fall on the block. I touched the old desk, its scratches like the marks of time. In each spot, I stood for a minute, saying goodbye to an old friend. No tears, just a deep quiet. Before bed, I set up the mini camera. Aisha had sent small as a piece of chalk. Looks like a phone charger. I placed it in the front hall and connected it to the app. I wasn't installing it to spy on anyone, but to protect myself. If anything happened when Chloe and Dylan returned, I'd have clear, uncontestable proof. The next morning, I sat at the desk and wrote a letter by hand. Every word, slow and clear, no venom, just reason. "Dear Chloe and Dylan, I know you'll come back and see that everything has changed. This house was transferred legally, and I moved out by my own choice. All of your belongings are safely stored at Carolina Storage. The address and unit are listed below. You have 30 days to arrange pickup. After that, the facility will proceed under its policies. My money, my decisions. Dad, Walter Gaines." People say when one door closes, God opens another. I don't know if that's true, but today I close my own door with my own hand. And you, if you were me, would you have the courage to lock the past? Tell me in the comments. I truly want to know what you think. I read it twice, folded it, sealed the envelope, and set it neatly on the hall table. Next to it, I placed a copy of the storage receipt and an old set of keys. Before leaving, I did one last sweep. Power, water, gas, everything off. The house tidy, clean, no extra lights. It felt like it was sleeping, no resentment, no clinging. At the door, I stopped. On the shelf was Miriam's photo in a cherry frame. Morning light hit her face just right, as if she were really smiling. I touched the glass, my voice unsteady. "I won't let them put a price on you and me, Miriam. I promise." I hung the new keys on the hook, took one last look. A house full of memories now held only quiet and a hint of wood scent. I closed the door and heard the clear, final click. Down the steps, the morning breeze moved through my gray hair. I didn't look back. Not because I didn't remember, because I'd remembered enough. My car was waiting in the drive. I opened the door and sat behind the wheel. In the mirror, the little house sat still in the first light. Softly, as a final goodbye, I said, "Sleep well, dear house. I'll carry your spirit and ours into the new place." I started the engine. It purred, blending with the morning birds. The tires rolled over the gravel, and the house disappeared behind the line of blooming magnolias. Ahead, the sun met me like a calm beginning. And inside, I knew I'd left the old place, but I was taking everything that truly belonged to me. Monday morning, Raleigh's sky was unusually clear, as if the city wanted a new week. I put on the light blue shirt Miriam once picked, tightened my tie, and looked in the mirror. Past 70 or not, I kept myself neat not for praise, but to remind myself I'm still driving my own life. The Crescent Title and Closing Company office was on the 4th floor of a glass building downtown. When I walked in, the receptionist warmly led me to a small conference room, every document already laid out on the table. Aisha was there, along with Marcus and a representative for the buyer. No one said much, just polite looks, professional enough to hide what they were really thinking. Aisha looked at me and gave a small nod. "Mr. Gaines, this is the most important part. Read every line carefully." I sat down and opened each packet. The deed transfer was on top, with the clause I'd requested allowing the seller to remain for 30 days. Seeing that line made me exhale. Not because I doubted them, but because I wanted to be sure no one would ever speak for me again. I read closely and asked about anything unclear. Aisha explained each provision: taxes, transfer fees, payment terms, and funding timeline. She missed nothing. The buyer's rep kept nodding, apparently respecting how careful I was. Finally, it was time to sign. I picked up the pen, blue ink spread evenly across the paper. 1, 2, 3. 7 signatures in all. With each one, I felt another chain inside me break. Marcus handed me the closing statement. The numbers were clear. Sale price, $905,000. Legal fees, taxes, brokerage costs, $8,300. Net proceeds, $896,700. Aisha confirmed, "All funds will be sent directly to your account at Piedmont Community Bank. No one but you can access it." I signed the last box and set the pen down. A light wave passed through me, relief mixed with emptiness. The house I built with my hands, brick by brick, frame by frame, was now just a paper transaction. Strangely, I didn't feel regret. What I felt was a rare kind of freedom. As I left the title office, my phone buzzed. A text from Piedmont Community Bank. Transaction successful. $896,700 has been credited to account number GNS 8472. I stopped in the hallway and stared at the screen. Another man might call that a reward. To me, it was proof of a lesson. Sometimes you have to let go to keep the most important thing: dignity. I went straight to the bank to complete the security setup. David Morrison, the branch manager, greeted me with a friendly smile. "Congratulations, everything posted smoothly. Now we'll activate the premium features," he explained clearly. The account would have geolocation locks, so transactions only work within set areas. Any access from an unfamiliar location would be blocked and alert my phone. There was also a hardware security token, a small USB-like device required to confirm transactions. I took the device and nodded. I inspected job safety for 30 years. Now I'm inspecting the safety of my own life. Seems appropriate. David laughed. "I'm pretty sure you'll manage it better than we do." Then I asked to open a separate spending account for daily use. "The principal," I said, "I won't touch for 6 months. I only need enough to live on." David noted it, finished the paperwork quickly, and shook my hand firmly before I left. That afternoon, Aisha sent me a secure email with an attachment. "Any legal request, power of attorney, or complaint from any other individual, including relatives, is void without your direct signature or that of a legal representative designated by you. Keep this on hand. I've also retained a copy at the firm in case they try to interfere. I read it slowly, then printed 2 copies, one for the safe in my new apartment and one for the Magnolia Ridge building management in case of any surprises. That evening I handled a few small tasks. I swapped to a new SIM and a new number, saving only 3 contacts: Aisha, Marcus, and Linda, the building manager. I bought a personal property insurance policy for $50,000, covering the items and keepsakes I'd moved to the apartment. I printed 2 extra copies of the letter to post at the old house in case they tore down the first one I'd left. Caution is an old habit, and it's never wasted. When everything was done, I opened the cupboard and took out a bag of dried beans. I hadn't cooked this in a long time, but Miriam called it a beginning dish: southern red bean soup with onion, celery, and a bit of smoked meat. The small apartment filled with a warm, simple smell. I set the pot to simmer and stirred, feeling like each movement reconnected me to an old habit I'd forgotten. When the soup was ready, I sat at the table under the soft yellow light. I didn't turn on the TV or play music. I just ate, one spoonful at a time, taking in the feeling that no one could call me a burden anymore. Night fell. I turned off the lights and drew the curtains. Outside, street lights slipped through the leaves, painting long streaks across the wall. I lay down on the new bed, clean white sheets, a light blanket that smelled freshly laundered. It was so quiet I could hear the faint tick of the digital clock in the corner. The first sleep in Magnolia Ridge took its time coming, but when it did, it was whole. I didn't dream of Chloe, and I didn't dream of the old house. I only saw Miriam in a fall garden, wind lifting maple leaves, and she smiled calm, as if saying, "You did it." I woke in the night and stared at the ceiling. Relief and emptiness existed together, like 2 sides of the same coin. But for the first time in years, I knew exactly where I was, and everything around me, every dollar, every drop of water, every breath was mine. I whispered, "Good night, Miriam. I'm okay." Then I closed my eyes and let that new peace carry me into a deep sleep. No hauntings, no fear. Friday, I got up earlier than usual. Light rain tapped lightly against the apartment windows. All week I'd lived slowly, quietly reading the paper, watering plants, walking around Magnolia Ridge. But today, my heartbeat had a different rhythm, not from fear but because I knew this was the day everything closed. Out of habit, I opened the phone app. The mini camera in the old house was still working perfectly. The frame was empty, afternoon light dimming. The room was quiet, and the letter sat on the small table by the door. I checked the time. 4:30. Chloe and Dylan usually drove back from Atlanta after the conference, about a 6-hour trip. Without traffic, they'd arrive around 5:30, same as always. I'd timed it down to the minute, even their fuel stop at South Point. I poured a cup of coffee and sat in the chair. The rain outside grew heavier, like a curtain over the city. Inside, I wasn't tense, just a steady calm, as if I'd already seen what was about to happen. 4:45 p.m. My phone buzzed softly. Motion detected. Front door. I set the cup down and opened the app. The camera showed their black SUV sliding into the driveway, headlights sweeping across the wall. The door opened and Chloe stepped out first. Still in a beige work dress, hair in a high bun, heels clicking on the wet brick path, Dylan followed with 2 rolling suitcases. They said something, but the rain blurred the sound. I turned up the audio. Dylan's voice came through, irritated. "I told you we should have left him at the facility. Now we've got to drive all the way back to check." Chloe answered, tired. "Just grab the tax files and check the mail. Quick in and out." I smiled. Quick in and out. They didn't know those words were about to become the longest stop of their lives. Chloe pulled a key from her purse and slid it into the front lock. She turned hard. Nothing. Once, twice, 3 times, still nothing. Her face tightened. She tried a spare. The metal clicked and fell silent. "What the hell?" she muttered. Dylan stepped up, grabbed the key ring and tried again, even leaned into the door. It didn't budge. "The locks have been changed," he snapped. "What is he doing?" "No way. Dad doesn't even know how to call a locksmith." "You're underestimating him." I watched it on the screen and took a slow sip of coffee. Exactly as planned. Chloe rang the bell. Once, twice, 3 times. Of course, no answer. Dylan exhaled and went around back. I switched to the second camera. He tried the kitchen door, then the garage, then the first floor windows. All locked. Except for one kitchen window I'd left slightly latched. "Check the other side," Chloe called. He bent down and touched the frame. It shifted slightly. He paused, then said quietly, "Looks like it wasn't locked tight." "Do it," she said. Urgent. I watched him slide his hand in, lift the sash and slip through like a burglar. A minute later, the front door opened from the inside. Chloe walked in, pulling the suitcase, rain slicking her hair to her face. She froze as soon as she crossed the threshold, eyes locked on the white envelope on the table. She stiffened, then stepped over. Her hand shook as she tore it open. Dylan came up behind her, brushing off his jacket. "What's he sulking about now?" he said. Then silence. Both of them read, eyes fixed on the page. On camera I could see Chloe's face change from surprise to panicked, then finally collapsing. Dylan clenched the paper, muttering a curse. "He sold the house," he growled. "No way!" Chloe almost shouted. "How could Dad do this?" She flung the letter down and put her hands on her head. I heard a choked sob through the phone. "How could Dad be so cruel?" she cried. The sound tightened my chest for a second, but I breathed deep. It wasn't that I didn't love my child. It was that sometimes love needs a boundary. Dylan slammed his hand on the table. "Look, I told you. He's not in control. This is what a senile man does." "Shut up," Chloe snapped, tears spilling. "You're the one who pushed to put Dad in a nursing home so we could sell. Because I thought he wasn't competent. And now, he's more competent than you are." They started blaming each other, voices echoing through the empty room. Dylan yanked at his hair and dropped into a chair. Chloe paced, staring around like she couldn't believe it. "You don't understand," she choked. "How will Dad live? He needs money, he needs care. Needs." Dylan laughed bitterly. "Didn't you read? He's sitting on nearly $900,000. The ones who need money now are us." She froze. Her face went pale. "What do you mean?" "I haven't told you." He lowered his head. "I lost my job 2 months ago. They cut the contract." "What?" "I figured if we sold the house we'd have enough to start over. But now," he laughed dryly, "now we've got nothing." I heard every word through the camera, clear as if I were in the room. The house had become the place where 2 people dumped their anger after planning a future on someone else's back. Chloe wiped her face and grabbed her phone. "I'll call a lawyer," she said, voice shaky but hard. "My friend Robert worked at a property office. He'll know how to overturn this." I smiled thinly. Aisha predicted this. We had already filed a complete legal record with the local court, proper transfer, notarized, documented funds. Even if they hired a whole team, nothing could proceed without my signature. The camera showed Chloe dialing, then lowering the phone, stunned. "The number isn't in service." Dylan jumped up, grabbed the phone and dialed again. I guess they were calling the old landline. I'd terminated it 2 weeks ago. They ran outside and called over to the neighbor, Mrs. Whitaker. The door camera caught her stepping onto the porch, arms crossed, shaking her head, saying something. I could read her lips. "I don't know." He moved out. Chloe stood frozen in the rain, water mixing with tears on her cheeks. Dylan just stared at the ground. I muted the sound and leaned back. The screen still showed them standing in a quiet, empty house, the hall light flickering like a weak heartbeat. I knew they were tasting what they'd planned for me, being cut off from a place once called home. I set the phone down, folded my arms, and closed my eyes. No gloating, no anger, just the calm of justice. Outside my window, the rain kept falling, steady, washing away the old. Softly, almost a whisper, I said, "Justice doesn't need noise, Miriam. It just needs to be on time." Then I stood, switched off the lamp, and let the screen go dark. The room went dim, light as the last breath of a fight I had won quietly, but completely. I thought they'd leave after a few minutes. They didn't. The camera kept rolling for over an hour. They circled the empty rooms, their voices echoed off the walls, mixing with the rain on the metal roof. At first, a small argument, then louder, harsher. "You're the one who told me to put Dad in a nursing home," Chloe screamed, voice cracking. "Don't pin this on me. You told me he was slipping, that selling the house was our plan." I said I was tired, Dylan, tired of carrying this house, tired of the bills. "You're the one who said, 'Sell it, then I can take a break from work,' because I thought he was about to die." The words blew the room apart. Chloe froze, tears spilling again. She looked around at the room, the letter still open on the table, a record of everything they'd intended. I sat in my new apartment, the screen light on my face. I wasn't angry anymore. I was quiet with sadness. Family, what I thought never changed, was now just blame. Chloe sat down, hands shaking as she held the page. Her voice dropped, tight. "All our stuff. Dad boxed it all." She read on, halting. "Stored at Carolina Storage. Receipt attached. 30 days to pick up." She folded the letter and covered her face. Dylan slammed the table. The thud shook the camera. "He's insane. Who does this to their own kid?" I smiled sadly. "Who does this? Someone his kid treated like a debt, a problem to solve." Chloe cried harder, words breaking. "Our future, it's gone. We have nothing." That line hit me not out of pity, but because it exposed the truth. The future they spoke of never included me. It was built on stripping me, on treating my memories like an obstacle. I pushed my chair back and drew a long breath. In my head I heard Miriam's voice from far away. "When people wear masks, Walter, the truth falls loud." Exactly. That argument was the sound of masks hitting the floor, no more pretending, no paint left to cover greed and disappointment. I opened my phone and texted Aisha, "If they vandalize or attempt entry, activate the restraining order. I don't want a confrontation, just peace." She replied almost immediately. "Understood, Mr. Gaines. The petition is ready. If there's any attempt to trespass, I'll file it the same day. Please, get some rest." I set the phone down on the table. Everything now had clear boundaries. No need to shout, no need to argue, just stay quiet and let the law do its work. That evening, my phone buzzed again. It was Mrs. Whitaker, my former neighbor. I'd asked her not to share anything, and yet she was calling. I hesitated before answering. "Mr. Walter?" Her voice was rough, tired. "Yes, it's me, Mrs. Whitaker. I'm not calling out of curiosity. I just want you to know." Chloe came by. She was crying, asking where you'd gone. I didn't answer, just told her the girl's lost her way. I meant it. I was silent a moment. The wind slid through the apartment window frame, blending with her voice like a worried mother's. "Thank you," I said softly. "That's enough. I'm not angry." "I know you're not angry. You're just sad." She was right. But the sadness wasn't heavy anymore. It had settled into acceptance. After the call, I looked at the phone a few seconds and set it face down. I didn't open the camera app again. Enough. I didn't need to keep watching them to prove I was right. Justice doesn't need an audience. I stood, poured water into a glass pot, and added a few dry tea leaves. As the hot water bloomed, The scent rose gentle, familiar, reminding me of afternoons when Miriam sat on the porch, listened to jazz, and smiled. I turned on the radio. John Coltrane's saxophone came in slow and husky, rinsing away the last flecks of anger inside me. The melody slipped through the small room, softening the air, warming it. I sat on the sofa, hands wrapped around the hot cup, watching the night outside loosen into a wash of city lights. Across town, Chloe was probably still crying, and Dylan trying to salvage a little pride with blame. But I didn't need to know anymore. I just wanted to live the rest of my life without having to justify myself. At 10 p.m., I opened the old leather notebook, the one I started the day Miriam died. I turned to a fresh page, the pen trembling slightly. The desk lamp fell across the pale paper. I wrote slowly, each word clear. Forgiveness doesn't mean opening the door. Forgiveness is for letting your own heart sleep, and the door must stay locked, because once trust is taken, no apology can fix it. I paused, read the lines again, then closed the book. Inside, it felt like shutting an old door, the soft click, final but relieving. On the shelf, Miriam's framed photo was still there. I looked into her eyes in the picture, kind but bright, as if asking, "Are you all right now?" I smiled faintly. "I am. This time I don't need to win anything back. I just need to keep myself." I turned off the radio, but the sax still played in my head, the aftertaste of a tune that had reached the bottom. Outside, the rain had stopped. The air opened up quiet, clear as a fresh sheet of paper. I pulled back the curtain and looked down at the streetlights reflecting on wet asphalt, spreading like ink. In that moment, I knew it was truly over. No anger, no regret, no debt. I whispered a small prayer into the night. May God light their way, as He has mine. And if they one day understand, I still won't turn my back, but I won't go back. I switched off the light. The last glow faded, leaving only the soft wind at the window. That night, I slept well for the first time, without dreaming of the old house. Morning light slipped through the curtains at Magnolia Ridge, so gentle and calm I almost forgot there were quiet storms gathering elsewhere. I brewed a cup of black coffee, opened my laptop and checked my inbox, and, as expected, Dylan had struck. The subject line screamed in caps, "Request to clarify marital property and illegal transfer." The tone was even more arrogant than I remembered. "Mr. Gaines, we have reason to believe the house on Mayfield Street was purchased with marital assets from your marriage to the late Mrs. Miriam Gaines and is therefore community property. Your unilateral sale without notice to the lawful daughter may constitute conversion of inheritance. We will file suit if you do not respond within 72 hours. I finished reading and gave a slight smile. Every word leaked desperation dressed up as half-baked legalese. I forwarded the email to Aisha Patel with a short note. "Please handle by the book." "In under 2 hours," Aisha replied, attaching the email she'd sent Dylan. Her tone was cool and precise, like a fine blade. "Mr. Mercer, the property in question is the separate property of Mr. Walter Gaines, established by a 1997 purchase agreement prior to marriage. Mrs. Miriam Gaines executed a quitclaim deed on file with McLean and Associates, file #2 right 7. Any claim of marital property is baseless. Additionally, under Section 14 to 318 of the North Carolina Civil Code, threats, coercion, or unlawful interference with an elder's property rights may be subject to prosecution. Please cease direct contact. Any further communication, if necessary, will be through counsel." I finished reading and nodded. Not a harsh word, but every line strong enough to snuff out a weak ambition. Around noon, my phone rang. Chloe's name on the screen. I hesitated a few seconds before answering. Her voice was choked, nothing like her usual sharpness. "Dad, why did you do this to me? Be specific, Chloe." "You sold the house without telling me. You know I'm struggling." I know. But that house was mine, sweetheart. And from now on, everything goes through attorneys, not phone calls. I don't need an attorney. I need my dad. Then remember, I'm still here. I'm just not anyone's wallet anymore. Silence. I heard her trying not to sob. For a second, I almost softened, but then I remembered what Miriam once said. Sometimes love needs discipline, or it becomes a chain. I ended the call calmly. If you need it, my attorney can provide the storage information. As for the rest, we'll talk when we're both truly calm. I set the phone down and took a long breath. Not pleasant, but right. In the afternoon, Marcus called. Mr. Gaines, good news. The buyer is fully satisfied after the final walkthrough. They send their thanks for leaving the house so tidy, and they'll deliver payment documents on schedule. I smiled. Good. Please thank them for me. And thank you, Marcus, you've been very professional. I should be thanking you, he said. Not many people sell a house at your age and stay this composed. Most panic or regret. You seem to have planned every step. I chuckled softly. I was a building inspector, Marcus. Before I sign any contract, I check the foundation. That evening, Aisha sent another update. The temporary restraining order has been filed. If they return or threaten, police can intervene immediately. I've also saved copies of your camera footage in case it's needed. I thanked her and shut down the computer. Everything was in order, quiet, tidy, without a raised voice. That's what I wanted, a win without a fight. But the win didn't make me happy. When night fell, the emptiness was still there, like an old scar that still aches when touched. So I did what Miriam used to do when her mind was heavy. I organized the finances. I moved part of the sale proceeds into a 6-month certificate of deposit, low interest, but safe. I split the rest between a small living expense account and an emergency fund. I noted carefully in my book, don't touch the principal for 6 months. Live simply, live by plan, that's real freedom. The next day, I toured the community center at Magnolia Ridge. Bright space, older folks laughing around chessboards, some tending plants, others practicing music. In one corner, a wood repair class, nimble hands sanding and joining scraps into picture frames and bookshelves. I stopped to watch. The smell of wood warmed my chest. An instructor asked, "Did you ever do woodworking?" I nodded. My whole life. Then you should sign up. We could use another set of eyes. I put my name down right then. Not because I wanted to teach, but because I wanted my hands busy. When your hands work, your mind stops picking at wounds. In the days that followed, I settled into a new rhythm. Morning paper, a light lunch, afternoons at the wood class, evening walks under the blooming magnolias. Their scent pulled Miriam to mind, sweet and clear, like the mornings she baked and cracked the window to let the sunlight in. I often paused beneath a big magnolia near the gate, looking up at the white petals with a hint of gold swaying in the breeze. Each time, a simple peace rose in me, the kind I hadn't felt in years. I didn't beat anyone. I just reclaimed the quiet inside my chest. One night, back home, I pulled out the leather notebook. Between pages filled with cramped lines, I slid in a new sheet, a letter to Chloe. Chloe, I don't know what you'll think if you read this, but I want to share a small story. When you were 16, I built you a pine study desk by hand. You studied under that lamp, and I stood at the doorway watching. You said, "Dad, I'll try to make you proud." Years have passed, and I still remember that look. I'm not angry, and I don't hold a grudge. But I hope you understand. Some debts can't be paid with money, they can only be repaid with gratitude and growth. When you're ready, my heart's door is still open, but you have to knock with your real hands, not with a plan. I folded the letter and placed it in the desk drawer. Not sent. I'll send it when I'm truly at peace. Outside, light rain began. I stood by the window, listening to wind slide through the magnolias, their scent drifting in soft as Miriam's breath. I closed my eyes and said quietly, "See, Miriam, I kept the human part of me, even in the worst of it." I smiled. No more bitterness. Just an old man learning to live again, day by day, with the same hands that built it all. On Tuesday morning, Aisha called, voice steady and gentle as always. "Mr. Gaines, Miss Chloe is requesting a formal meeting. I've arranged it at our office with both sides present. The goal is to de-escalate, not to litigate." I was quiet a beat, then answered, "All right. I'll come. But it's only a conversation, no money talks." After hanging up, I stared out the window. Morning sun lay across the magnolias in full bloom, peaceful and stirring. Once, if someone had told me I'd be seeing my daughter again, I would have been overjoyed. Now it felt like quiet preparation, like walking into an old building I'd constructed, knowing where it was weak, where it might fail. I chose the deep blue jacket Miriam liked, pressed it, and combed my hair. In the mirror, my face showed its years, but my eyes were clear. I told myself, "Walter, today isn't a trial. It's a day for the truth and for moving on." The law office lights were on. The faint smell of coffee and the clack of keyboards hung in the serious air. Aisha was waiting in a small conference room beside a long wooden table, 3 chairs on each side. I arrived on time. 9:30. Chloe came 5 minutes later with Dylan. She was neatly dressed gray blazer, hair in a tight bun, but there were faint dark circles under her eyes. Dylan looked different, wrinkled suit, evasive eyes. It seemed he still hadn't found a new job. Aisha stood, shook each hand, then spoke in a neutral tone. "We're not here to fight. We're here to restate everyone's rights, duties, and legal limits. Mr. Gaines, Miss Chloe, I ask that we keep things respectful." Chloe nodded, but her hand clenched the paper she was holding. When she spoke, her voice was hoarse. "Dad, I'm sorry for how I spoke and for letting Dylan get in the middle of family business, but I still think you need care. You live alone. What if something happens?" I looked at her calmly, without flinching. "Care is when you want someone to be at peace, not when you need them to do what you want. I appreciate your concern, but I choose where I live." She bit her lip, eyes reddening. "I'm just afraid you'll be lonely." "I am lonely," I said slowly. "But loneliness doesn't kill people. Losing your freedom can." The room went quiet. Aisha sat straight, taking notes, glancing now and then at Dylan, still silent, as if calculating an exit. I turned to my son-in-law and spoke lightly but firmly. "Dylan, I don't resent you. Everyone makes mistakes. But if you ever send another threatening letter or interfere with my property again, Aisha will deal with the police for me, not me." He wet his lips, voice small. "I understand, sir." Aisha cut in, professional, but no less firm. "I've brought a summary of the applicable statutes. If Mr. Mercer continues unauthorized contact or financial pressure, Section 14318, regarding protection of the elderly, will apply. This isn't a warning, it's standard procedure." He dropped his gaze and said nothing. Chloe looked over at her husband, then quietly wiped a tear. Aisha moved to the documents. "As to ownership," she said, opening the file, "this is a copy of the 1997 purchase agreement in Mr. Gaines's sole name, along with Mrs. Miriam Gaines's quitclaim. I also have a copy of the will confirming there's no real property beneficiary. The call on the 5th of last month in which Miss Chloe and Mr. Dylan discussed selling the house without authority was recorded in accordance with the law. Mr. Gaines chose not to release the recording, but a summary has been authenticated." Dylan lifted his head slightly, face gone pale. Chloe stared at the table, knuckles white. I said nothing more. I wasn't there to humiliate them. I wanted them to face reality. The meeting ran nearly an hour. When all the paperwork was confirmed, Aisha closed the file. "Accordingly, Mr. Gaines's property rights are fully preserved. No party may contact, demand, or use the pretext of care to meddle in finances. If there's an emotional need, the family may arrange to meet privately outside the legal scope. Silence again. Chloe turned to me. Dad, so we only see each other in a lawyer's office now? I smiled gently. No, honey, I don't want that. I'm willing to meet you Sunday night, just the two of us. Dinner, conversation, no paperwork, no lawyers. But from now on, no one decides for me. Chloe nodded, tears falling but no sobbing. She understood. Dylan glanced over, started to say something, then thought better of it. We didn't end with a hug, or with, we're back to how we were. What we had were clear boundaries, and sometimes that's exactly what saves the piece of love that's left. As Aisha walked me out, she said softly, You did very well. Calm but not yielding. That's how you keep respect. I smiled. Thank you. After years as an inspector, I learned one thing. The right silence is worth more than evidence. Outside, a light breeze moved through my gray hair. I paused on the front steps and took a long breath. My shoulders were straight, my stride even, not because I'd won, but because no one was dragging me anymore. I pulled out my phone and sent Chloe a short message. Thank you for coming. I'd like to see you Sunday, if you truly want to talk, not to fix the past, but to understand the present. I slipped the phone into my pocket and walked down the street. The Raleigh sky that day was unusually blue. Tree shadows fell across the pavement like soft brushstrokes of memory. That evening, I made a simple meal, some bean soup and toast. As I took the first spoonful, I suddenly remembered something Miriam once said. Forgiveness isn't weakness, it's the courage to look at someone with the eyes of truth. I realized I could do that now. I wasn't dodging or hurting over my daughter's words anymore. I had only one wish left to keep my heart straight, no matter how crooked family ties might get. Before bed, I opened my journal and wrote a few lines. Today I saw my daughter again. No hug, no tears, no reconciliation. But maybe that quiet is the starting point for something decent. Justice is done. Now it's time to relearn how to be a father calmly, not by control. I closed the book and turned out the light. Outside, the magnolia scent drifted on the night air. I closed my eyes and smiled. At last, after all these years, I could face it, not my daughter but myself. The morning was crystal clear, the kind of gentle spring sun Raleigh does best, warm enough to chase off the chill, not harsh enough to wear you down. I got up early, made coffee, and shrugged on my familiar deep blue jacket. Today was handover day. I arrived at the old address right on time. Mayfield Street was the same quiet rows of trees, a few neighbor houses with fresh paint, and my former place still holding its old look. The windows were bright. The porch still had the 2 wooden steps I'd built. One difference. This time, I walked in as the man handing it over, not the man who owned it. The buyers were a young couple, about 30, with a little girl around 6. We shook hands politely. We really didn't expect it to feel this warm, the wife said, looking around, morning light flashing in her hair. It reminds me of my mom's old house. You've maintained everything so well, the husband added. Even the floors don't squeak. I smiled and said nothing. I just took a last look, sunlight slanting across the 3/4-inch oak flooring I'd installed myself. For a second I saw Miriam in the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron and glancing back with a grin. Beautiful, Walter. Just like you said. I set a small card on the windowsill beside the flowers they'd brought. On it, I'd written simply, wishing your family happiness. Walter. No more words were needed. I'd already said everything by how I left the house, tidy, clean, and without a trace of resentment. That afternoon, I carried my old toolbox to the community wood repair class at Magnolia Ridge. It was busier than usual. Folks had heard I'd worked wood for a living and were curious about the new guy teaching. I just smiled and pulled out a few old pine scraps and some rusty nails. We're going to turn old into new, nothing wasted, I said. Sometimes what's been broken only needs a decent pair of hands to touch it again. A few heads nodded. I showed how to sand, cut, and join pieces. The tap of hammers and chisels mixed with easy laughter. A silver-haired lady next to me pursed her lips and said, "Mr. Gaines, your hands are steady. I don't think I could ever build a shelf like that." "You never know," I said. "Wood's like people, the older it gets, the more patience it needs." By the end, everyone had something to take home. I stayed behind to clean up, ran my fingers over the old hammer, and felt a lightness, usefulness. The feeling I thought I'd lost was coming back. That evening, I had an unexpected visitor. Mrs. Whitaker, my old neighbor, walked into Magnolia Ridge holding an apple pie. "I heard you moved here, so I baked a little something. I'm no great cook, but I remember you like this kind." I laughed. "You still remember?" "How could I forget? You helped me replace that porch roof, remember? We sat on the porch, ate pie, and talked like two old friends. No one mentioned Chloe or the old house. Just small things, gardens, the air, and the smell of spring." Now and then she chuckled. "Looking at you now, I'm relieved. Not many folks our age dare to start again." "I'm not starting over," I said. "I'm just keeping on at my own pace." When she left, I checked my phone and saw a text from Chloe. Short. "I went to the storage, picked up everything. Thank you for leaving my childhood albums." I read it a few times and my chest warmed. I typed back without edits. "The albums are yours. The house is mine. Both deserve respect." I didn't know if she'd reply, but the fact she wrote at all, that was a thin crack in the wall of silence. Sometimes a crack is all the light needs. I spent the next morning installing a small bookshelf in the apartment. Old oak, re-sanded, polished, and fitted piece by piece. When I finished, I set a few old Bibles on it, a framed photo of Miriam, and the little desk clock she bought in 1983. The shelf wasn't big, but it fit the corner by the window, the spot where the afternoon sun lands every day. I stepped back and looked. A modest beginning, but enough to remind me I was still living, still making something. On Sunday I went to St. Thomas, the church near Magnolia Ridge. It was quiet, high vaulted, with light flowing through stained glass like a living painting. I sat in the third pew and lit a candle for Miriam. The tiny flame flickered, reflected in my eyes like a morning long ago, the day we married, when she lit a candle just like this. The priest spoke about freedom with responsibility. "Freedom," he said, "isn't doing whatever you want. It's knowing your boundaries and not crossing someone else's." I sat still, feeling as if it had been said just for me. All these years, I'd let my kindness spill past its banks and let others step over the line I should have kept. Now I understood true freedom is knowing where to stop. After the service, I stepped outside. A light breeze moved my coat as the bells rang out. I stood on the steps, looked up into a sky as clear as freshly washed glass. For the first time in years, I felt it. I was back. Not the father pushed out of his own house. Not the husband living in yesterday. Just Walter Gaines, an ordinary old man who can brew coffee, fix wood, forgive, and know there's still plenty worth smiling about. I whispered a reminder to myself. Walter Gaines is back on his own rhythm. As I walked past the magnolias at the gate, petals drifted onto my shoulder. I knew that's how the world congratulates a man who's learned to live again with contentment and calm. The afternoon was quieter than usual. In the soft gold light through the window, I sat at my desk and opened the unsent envelope to Chloe. The paper edges had begun to yellow. My weeks-old handwriting was still steady, if a little shaky. I held the pen, paused a long moment, then added one last line. "When you're ready to tell the truth, I'll listen. No blame, no demand. Just a doorway enough for my daughter to know. My heart's door still exists, but she keeps the key." I folded it, slid the envelope back into the drawer with my journal. I didn't seal it, didn't date it. I've learned that what matters most doesn't need to be rushed by time. That night I cooked gumbo, Miriam's favorite. Celery, smoked sausage, and shrimp simmered until the apartment filled with it. I invited a few new friends from Magnolia Ridge. Henry from the third floor, Ruth with the orchids, and the older couple I'd played chess with that afternoon. No one asked about the past. We just ate, laughed, and traded life stories. The laughter was warm and filled the room, something I hadn't heard in years. Not loud or fake, just the real laughter of people who've seen a lot and know happiness can be as simple as sitting together and not feeling lost. I looked around the table and felt my chest let go. Maybe Miriam was here in the gumbo's scent, in the light through the window, in a smile that finally didn't feel forced. When everyone left, I washed dishes, wiped the table, then sat by the window and opened my journal. I wrote, "Justice isn't revenge. Justice is getting back the right to say, I choose. Choose kindness. Choose boundaries. Choose peace." I closed the book and looked out the glass. Raleigh's lights shimmered like a river. I watched a long time with no more regret. Only gratitude, grateful I'd found the courage to stand up, move on, and not pass anger down as an inheritance. The next morning was crystal clear. I walked the gravel path around the grounds. The magnolias were still white in bloom. Sunlight sifted through the leaves, falling on my shoulder like a hand light and warm. For a moment, I thought Miriam was walking beside me, saying nothing, just smiling. I stopped at a wooden bench by the little pond, took out my phone and typed a message to Chloe. "Sunday night, no money, no lawyers, just conversation. If you want, I'll be waiting." I didn't know if she'd answer, but I sent it. The message slipped off the screen, leaving the feeling of dropping a pebble into a pond. The water rippled, then smoothed over. By afternoon, I was dusting the little bookshelf I'd made last week. Sunlight ran over the polished wood. Miriam's photo threw a faint glint. I smiled. In this small apartment, everything is simple, and every piece has its place like me, finally knowing where I stand. Before bed, I wrote the last line of the day, slow and deliberate. A house isn't brick or wood. A house is the boundary you keep and the love you don't sell. I set down the pen and exhaled. Outside, night wind moved through the trees, carrying the magnolia's mild scent, like spring's quiet greeting. I closed the journal, turned off the light, and told myself, the circle is closed not with a slamming door, but with an open heart. If this story made you pause to think about family, gratitude, or dignity, tell me, where are you watching from? A small town, a quiet apartment, or somewhere I've never been? I read every comment, truly. Each line you leave is like a handshake through the screen, reminding me there are still many who understand how it feels to be a parent whose love is misunderstood yet chooses grace. If this meant something to you, tap like so it can reach another heart that needs it. And if you'd like to walk with me a while, an old man still learning to stand up and love without losing himself, hit subscribe. Thank you for staying to the end. Even a quiet view from you is enough to remind me we are never truly alone on the road back to self-respect and peace.